This is Shooter's Island. It's a small abandoned island that used to house a shipyard from the late 19th century and into the early 20th century. When the shipyard closed down, the owners left unfinished projects docked for the ocean to take. Looking at it now, you'd be justified for thinking that Shooter's Island is just some lonely rock off the coast of some small New England fishing town. But what if I told you it sits in the middle of the largest city in the United States? It's strange to think that a place like Shooter's Island sits wholly abandoned in a city with such a famously high land cost, but it's not alone for this dilemma. A huge number of islands in New York waters have been developed, but for one reason or another now sit utterly alone. They have fascinated me for the last couple of weeks, so I decided to pick out a few with a more interesting history to share with you guys. I'll circle back to Shooter's Island real quick. Its history begins in colonial times when it was first used as a hunting spot for American colonists. During the Revolutionary War, the Continental Army used Shooter's Island to exchange messages and spies in secret. The first shipyard on Shooter's Island was established in 1860 by a man named David Decker. Later, in 1898, the shipyard became the home of the Townsend Downing Shipbuilding Company, a company specializing in custom top-of-the-line yachts. The most notable vessel launched at Shooter's Island would be the Meteor III, a racing yacht commissioned by Kaiser Wilhelm II, the then Emperor of the German Empire. The Meteor III itself lived an interesting life. Its 1902 christening was attended by influential people such as President Teddy Roosevelt and Prince Heinrich of Prussia. It went on to be a pitiful racer and was sold to a series of wealthy owners and minor European royalty before ending up back in the hands of the US government, which used it during World War II. Unfortunately, the Meteor III was scrapped in 1945. A year after the launch of the Meteor III in 1903, the Shooter's Island shipyard changed hands to the Tidewater Oil Company, a subsidiary of the massive Standard Oil Corporation. They would shift Shooter's Island away from its elegant yachts for more utilitarian ships, such as cargo ships and oil tankers. They would continue their production of industrial ships until Shooter's Island permanently shut down in 1922, leaving its famous wrecked hulls to sink into the bay. The last ship to leave the island was the John Perry Mitchell, a firefighting boat bought by the city of New York. From what I could find, there's only one surviving Shooter's Island boat today. That's the Shenandoah, sister ship to the Meteor III. Today, Shooter's Island is owned by the city of New York and used as a bird refuge. If you're exploring New York City on Google Earth, you might spot a pair of strange, diamond-shaped islands off the coast of Staten Island. Built after the Staten Island Quarantine War, a riot that destroyed the quarantine hospital on mainland Staten Island, Hoffman and Swinburne were remote hospitals that were completed in 1873 to filter out incoming immigrants from Ellis Island, who may have been carrying deadly and highly contagious diseases. Those suspected of any illness were sent to Hoffman Island, and if you were declared ill, you would be transferred to Swinburne. There, the immigrants would wait until they were declared cured and sent to Ellis Island to enter the country proper. However, most significant illnesses such as cholera, smallpox, or yellow fever didn't have a cure during this time. The Swinburne Hospital was equipped with its own morgue and crematorium to reduce exposure to the sick. During World War I, immigration declined significantly. Later, the United States enacted the Immigration Act of 1924, which greatly restricted immigration from Europe, and also by then the state had developed alternative methods for managing infectious diseases. From 1938 to 1945, the United States Merchant Marine used the islands to train ship crews. They used the original hospital buildings and also placed Quonset huts on both islands. Since the end of the war, several ideas have been floated on what to use the islands for, from a pair of city parks to conjoining the two islands and building larger facilities. However, nothing has been done with them. In 1962, all structures on Hoffman Island were razed. In 1974, both islands were transferred to the National Park Service, and even though the structures on Swinburne Island were left standing, Hurricane Sandy pulled all but a few walls underneath the waves. Today, both islands are bird sanctuaries as well, but unlike Shooter's Island, this seems to have come from an inability to complete any projects on the land. Just north of Hoffman and Swinburne, in the East River, lies another pair of medical-related islands, North and South Brother Islands. However, today we'll focus on North Brother as it has some of the best preserved ruins anywhere in the city. The Dutch initially claimed both islands in the original New Amsterdam colony on which New York is based. However, nobody did anything with the Brother Islands until 1869, when a small wooden lighthouse was built on North Brother. Later, in the mid-1880s, Riverside Hospital moved from Roosevelt Island to North Brother Island. Riverside's original purpose was a smallpox hospital. However, on North Brother, it was expanded to a more general disease hospital. North Brother began fulfilling a role similar to Hoffman and Swinburne while focusing on patients who are already city residents. Riverside's first building, the waterfront gantry, was built in 1885, and the hospital continued to expand until the last building, the tuberculosis pavilion, was opened in 1943. Like some of the previous islands we've covered, North Brother would become less used around World War II due to new ways of fighting diseases. The most famous story surrounding Riverside Hospital would have been that of Typhoid Mary. Mary Malone was an Irish immigrant who started work in America as a housekeeper and later became a cook. Working as a cook, she was brought from house to house all over the city. At some point, Mary contracted typhoid fever. However, she kept working and would infect entire households all on her own. In 1907, a sanitation engineer confronted Mary, who refused to provide a test sample and threatened the engineer with a carving fork. She was later arrested and sentenced to quarantine on North Brother Island. She spent 3 long years at Riverside before being released on the condition that by no means should she continue work as a cook. She was provided with a job at a laundromat, but before too long, she was taking cooking positions under surnames. She worked in several restaurants, hotels, and most tragically, a hospital. Everywhere she went was a new outbreak until she was apprehended and once again sent to North Brother Island. She would spend the next 23 years on the island until her death in 1938. All in all, Mary contaminated at least 122 people and caused the deaths of 3. The media picked up her story, and Typhoid Mary became a boogeyman for the city. However, Riverside Hospital wasn't much longer for the world as well. After World War II, the empty facilities were briefly repurposed to house veterans attending local colleges. In the 50s, North Brother was turned into a drug recovery center. However, the buildings were abandoned again in 1963 due to the cost of maintenance and staff corruption. Since then, North Brother Island has been completely deserted. Its massive facilities are left as a reminder of its long and brutal history. The island's only visitors are the local seabirds and the occasional urban explorer. Rounding off today's video is Hart Island. It lies in the waters west of the Bronx. In its past, it's been home to several different facilities: a military base, prison camp, homeless shelter, a boys' reformatory, a jail, and a rehab center. It even housed missiles during the Cold War. The rotting shells of these buildings still speckle the island. However, Hart Island is mainly known for its ongoing job. The island holds over 1 million corpses, making it the largest single cemetery in the country. Left over from one profession or the next, if you found yourself on Hart Island, there's a solid chance that you're not making it off. The island deserves a video of its own, but I will try to summarize Hart Island's long and storied past in this one. The first public use of the land was a training camp for colored soldiers during the Civil War. A few months later, the facility was expanded to house Confederate POWs. The prisoners who died in Hart Island's abhorrent conditions were the first to be buried there. This privilege was later broadened to Union veterans who were not wealthy enough to buy their own plots. After the war in 1868, the city of New York bought Hart Island from their previous private owners and immediately expanded the graveyard to city residents. If you died in a New York hospital and didn't have any family or money, the city would send you to Hart Island. In 1870, the existing buildings were repurposed as a quarantine zone for a yellow fever outbreak. In 1885, a women's psychiatric hospital called the Pavilion was built and was continually expanded in the following years. Also in the late 1800s, a small industrial school and several prison workhouses were built. The workhouses used inmates from the nearby Blackwell prison. In 1924, Solomon Riley, a millionaire real estate tycoon, proposed to build an amusement park on Hart Island. Riley had started building a dance hall, boarding house, and a boardwalk, and even purchased 60 different steamboats for the operation. However, it was not to be. The state government raised concerns about the proposed park's proximity to the jail and hospital on the island, and the city condemned the land in 1925. Riley was later paid $144,000 for the seizure. In 1931, a Catholic chapel was built by the prisoners. However, during World War II, the government relocated the prison population to nearby Rikers Island to make room for another military training ground. However, this overloaded Rikers, and the inmates were returned. But now, the old turn-of-the-century workhouses were deemed inadequate to house the prisoners full-time, and the convicts were scattered at other facilities. The island was uninhabited until 1950, when construction began on a homeless shelter that doubled as a drunk tank for alcoholics. However, through the years, the new facility took more and more prisoners, until by the mid-50s, Hart Island only housed convicts serving short sentences. To serve this new role, a courthouse was built on the island. In 1956, Nike Ajax missile silos were installed in an effort to protect New York from any Atlantic-based threats. They would remain there until 1974. Back in 1959, the prison workhouses were demolished and a more modern facility was built. Unfortunately, it would only be used until 1966, when it changed hands to become a drug rehab center called Phoenix House. The center was enormously successful and later relocated to Manhattan in 1977 to expand its services. Since then, Hart Island has been abandoned, except for the cemetery. That's right. After all that history, Hart Island is still predominantly a cemetery. The island always received a steady stream of cadavers. However, it would see an influx from time to time, such as the AIDS outbreak of the 80s and 90s or the COVID-19 pandemic of the early 2020s. So this really begs the question, is Hart Island abandoned? Or better yet, will it ever be truly abandoned with its permanent residents?